We do have a sign-in sheet that Tyler is going to be posting from time to time if you could sign in so we know who's here. Um, Historically, we'll have a record of it. And I would like to thank Barbara Maddaloni, who's the our presenter today, who's going to talk to us session 2 about strike and a little more about what Annetta did last month to get us going on the topic. Barbara has a hat from the MTA and labor notes that she can put a different spin on this topic. And I just want to thank you, Barbara. Barbara, I don't know what else to say about you. Do you want to say anything more about yourself?
Sure. Hi. Welcome, everybody. Great to see you all. I always like getting on union Zooms and seeing all the "Don't privatize us" signs and things like that. So I'm Barbara Maddaloni. As Pamela said, I am currently with Labor Notes. For those of you who don't know, Labor Notes is a 42-year-old project. We are a publication and education project. We have a magazine, we publish books, we have a web post, and then we also do workshops and hold what we call troublemaker schools, where we work with rank and file union members to develop more militant, democratic, rank and file, transparent unions, which is part of what we're going to be talking about today relative to what that means in terms of strikes. I am also, like, officially by MTA terms, considered a retired member. I am not retired. I sometimes get irritable when people assume that I am. I'll try not to do that now, but I am still active in MTA. So excited to be here as both a Labor Notes person and an MTA person. So wanted to talk to you today, following up on Annetta's really wonderful presentation last time, and you weren't able to be here for Annetta's presentation. I recommend you go and take a look at it. It's in the link in the email invitation that was sent out. And one of the things that I thought you did really well, Annetta, was help us understand how much the right to strike is something that's been contested over time, that it is not like a given that we just have to live with, that it is something that there's like sort of a constant struggle about whether or not we will have a right to strike. And that struggle is between the state and management on one side, and interestingly enough, very much also on the public and the workers, often on the same side in this. What does it mean to have a right to strike? So I think it's important to understand that, especially since when we talk about striking, public sector workers striking in Massachusetts, often we get like, well, it's illegal. And that's led to sort of the end of the conversation, rather than, well, right now there's legislation, there's law that says we can't do it. What do we do in the face of that? That we can be active in the face of that law. And in fact, people in the past have been active in the face of laws, many laws, not just laws about right to strike. And it is actually social movements and activity that change laws, not laws that change social movements, that make social movements possible. So really important to begin, I think, from that understanding. So I put together a PowerPoint. I was saying to Pam and Tyler before we got on, I mostly use this as a cue card for myself. But I'll also say, like, I'll go ahead and share. I hate to not see people's faces is where I get have a problem. And I'll share this. Let me just be able to skip my slideshow. But part of why I want to share it is that I picked out a lot of pictures for it. And I like, Pamela was like, oh, that's colorful. And actually, I wanted to sort of give you a sense of the energy and transformation that's possible within the context of strikes and that actually begins. So the right to strike, why we need it, and how to win it. And I actually just want to explain this one picture to start off. I don't know if any of you have seen it before, but this photo was taken in Woburn when the members voted overwhelmingly to authorize a strike, the Woburn Teachers Association. And that is Barbara Locke, the president of the Woburn Teachers Association, who is looking at the camera. And those are the members behind her. And in some ways, I feel like that picture already begins to capture like the question of why we need it. If you think about the ways that we are shaped on a regular basis in our jobs, about our sense of power and capacity, the degree to which we find ourselves knowing ourselves as individuals, just in taking that strike authorization vote, that they chose to take this photo, to stand strong together, tells you like part of why we need the right to strike is that it is a space where we begin to know ourselves in ways that our jobs and our workplaces generally deny us to do that. So I just pulled out a couple of things, and we'll talk about all these later. But again, I wanted to have a sense of the energy of a strike. But part of why we need it is that it is as Annetta got to in her presentation, it's our real power. Our capacity to withhold our labor is the real leverage that we have. And the people in power understand that. The people in the State House understand that. Management understands that. And that's why they've taken it away from us. That's sort of very simple, but it's the truth. And so we need it because it is the strongest tool. I always worry about my language about this. The strongest weapon we have in order to win. And without it, what we see, and you all have experienced this, is that management drags their heels. What we've been experiencing in K-12 all over the state, school committees don't show up for bargaining sessions. They just hem and haw. They refuse the most reasonable demands. We go to school committee meetings, we do standouts, we have petitions and rallies, which are all important and ways to know ourselves in solidarity, but we actually don't have any leverage and any meaningful power. And we need that power, and I think this is really important. One of the arguments for, going back to FDR about why we would not have, public sector workers would not have the right to strike is that like we'd be striking against the citizens in that way. But one of the things, and we'll talk about this later, that I think is like especially important in terms of us needing the right to strike as public sector workers is that we have to defend the public good. That we are positioned as public sector workers to have a responsibility to as you are dealing with at UMass Amherst right now, and at UMass Boston as well, like how do we defend the public in public education when we don't have the power to do that? And so we have a responsibility, I see it as our responsibility as public sector workers to use the power that we have as workers to withhold our labor in order to defend the public. And that can seem sort of contradictory, but I actually think the way that it plays out in the real world is that that's not the case at all. And in fact, we have examples, from Chicago Teachers Union, where their strike in 2020 was able to win for students who were without homes, were able to win programs so that those students and their families would not be homeless. In Malden, when they went on strike, one of their demands was to say that students would not be evicted and their families during the school year, so that we have this power as public sector workers to organize for the public good, not only in terms of the institutions that we represent and serve, but for the communities that we serve. So I see somebody, Jason, we need the right to strike now. Absolutely, Jason, in chat. We're gonna figure out how we're gonna get there. So how do we win it? Well, one way to think about winning it, and I'll be interested in your thoughts about this, is that MTA is legislation calling that would I hate to even say give us back, to Steve's point in the chat, to hell with asking for permission, but would it rescind the illegality of this and say that it would allow educators and other public employees, except for public safety personnel, to legally strike after 6 months of failed negotiations with their employer. So there is a bill in the State House to allow us once again to strike. I have questions, and I'd be interested in any thoughts that you have about this, about how you understand like the power that we have to win this legislation. What has been your experience with building power to win a legislative fight? And maybe folks can raise their hand if you have something to say about that. Risa.
Hi. Hi, Barbara and everyone. Well, I was just thinking, I didn't really know about this. And so one thing is like educating and informing as like a foundation. Like it would be so fun to just even let people know this is, it exists. That would be the first thing for organizing.
So you didn't know about this?
No, it might have come in my head and left, but yeah, I didn't know about it.
Great. Yeah. So it's one of the reasons that it's been proposed is that it gives us a way to talk about the right to strike in Massachusetts. So we can say, we're not talking about striking because they'll say that that's illegal, but we were talking about legislation relative to the right to strike. And the MTA has been holding workshops about the legislation, which also happen to include conversations with people who've recently gone on successful strikes. Other thoughts about this legislation and what we can do with it? Who is that? Steve. Man after my own heart. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Other thoughts about this? Annetta.
So I'll just add in this, that I think we learned, we unionized public sector workers in Massachusetts have learned in recent legislative campaigns just how much power we have, right? Like we were able to win the Fair Share Amendment, and we won it in large part because we talked to people and found out that they not only care about public education, but they care about the workers within public education too. And I'm about to share a story, and I don't mean to say this in opposition, Steve, to what you just said, because that's where my heart is as well. My brother works in public higher education in Ohio, where they have legally had the right to strike for years. And there was a piece of legislation proposed, I don't know, 8-9 years ago now, to rescind that right. And the public sector workers across Ohio organized an overwhelming public support to maintain public sector workers' right to strike. And for me, that just speaks volumes about letting go of whatever fear we may have, like the kind of crap that was in the quote that I shared in the presentation from Roosevelt about, you have to serve the public and, you can't whatever, right, undermine them, et cetera, et cetera. But really understanding that we have the public support and we could also have the public support for this as well. And it wouldn't be something pitting public sector workers against the broader public.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is well taken, Annetta, in terms of public support. And as a matter of fact, recent polling from the MTA shows that more than 60% of voters support educators having a right to strike. And what we have seen in Woburn and Malden and Haverhill is overwhelming support from the communities for striking teachers. Indeed, one of the things that we saw in Woburn where they went on strike, and I would say Haverhill as well, that those are two places where the school committees and the mayors really tried to punish the teachers for striking. The communities came together and are ready to kick out the mayors and the school committees who tried to punish the teachers. And in fact, the Woburn community, small businesses and community members have been raising money to pay the fines that Woburn was stuck with after their strike. So I think it's important to understand, that's why I started with saying, like, this is not a legal question, this is a political question. And we operate politically in a number of different spaces. So I would say that you're absolutely right, Steve. Like, we're going to win this right by striking. We're not going to win this right by waiting for the legislators to come with us. At the same time, Annetta is right. We have the power to, and the community support to move this. And I think we want to be acting in both places at the same time. We're not going to get the legislators to do what we want. We could have a ballot question to do it because the public is with us. But when I think about the question of how to win the right to strike, I'm going to fall a little bit more in terms of like where the energy of our action should be, which is that we're going to win the right to strike by striking. We have had in Massachusetts since last May 4 illegal strikes of public sector workers, of K-12 educators: Brookline, Malden, Woburn, and Haverhill. All of those strikes were successful. All of those strikes had community support. And although fines were levied against some of those communities, as we have noted, as I noted before, like in Woburn, the community is working to pay the fine. As well, even though $200,000 sounds like a lot of money, if you take 600 workers who are going to be paid more than $500 more per year, you've more than made up for that fine pretty quickly in terms of the life of a contract and what that's going to mean for the workers. So I think it's really important to think about that, and to think about, like, and Annette and I might disagree a little bit about this, and that's cool. But to really be thinking about how we understand vectors of power. And I think that's the question here. So my personal struggle with saying we're going to have a legislative fight is that says that we're looking out and up for somebody to tell us about what power they're going to allow us to have or not have. And what we need to say is we are going to use the power that we do have to win the power that we have. That might be a ballot question, but it's also going to be that we actually begin to strike. And that's what's happened in history, is that it has been striking and organizing that has opened the space for striking and organizing. It hasn't been that we've waited for somebody, some elected, to give us that. And I'm just looking at what Mary Jo has to say here. Absolutely. that we can win, as I said, Mary Jo. Mary Jo's talking about sort of the broader social justice movement that comes with striking educators. I think that's absolutely true. And as I said earlier, we can also then bargain for wins for our communities. That's part of what Malden was doing. They bargained to say, we're not going to kick kids, we're not going to have children's families evicted during the school year. That's using our power as workers, the power to withhold our labor to win for our communities. So for me, this is not moving. I actually think that thinking about how we're going to win is a political issue, as I've said, and it's an organizing issue. And so what I want to take some time to think about today and talk to you about today is what happened in Brookline, Haverhill, Woburn, and Malden that they were able to win, and what lessons can we pull from that, and think about what it would look like in higher education to begin to win, and to use the strike to not only win the capacity to strike, but actually to win our demands. So I would say that the most common thread in the strikes that we've seen has been open bargaining. Brookline, Malden, Haverhill, and Woburn all did some version of open bargaining. And in fact, if you look at the screen here, that's Max Page and Deb McCarthy, the president, vice president of MTA, at a Malden open bargaining session. That's Becky Pringle, the president of the NEA, sitting with them in their open bargaining session. So in Malden and in Haverhill, their open bargaining was open to the community as well. It's happening in Gloucester right now. Part of why the communities were so profoundly behind them was that they were sitting in the rooms listening to school committees and mayors tell teachers who were asking for a living wage for paraprofessionals that was unreasonable. And the community was outraged by what their electeds were saying to the teachers and paraeducators who they respected and knew took care of their children every day and were providing for their children. But open bargaining is also really critical in terms of bringing members to actively participate in being the union. And open bargaining, as it is manifest in a variety of locals right now, can be anything from a certain number of silent representatives who come and sit and then go out and talk about what happened in their communities to, as we see down in the bottom right picture there, that is, again, that's the Malden open bargaining session with Melrose teachers behind them. And the Malden educator has just been speaking about their demands. So really deep activity on the part of membership, actively presenting their demands, their issues to the school committee. This does a lot of things in terms of member engagement, but one of the things that it does is that it brings members face to face, just as I said about the community, with the way the structures of power work. And they get pretty pissed off pretty quickly when they realize that management doesn't share our interests, and they get to experience that. But it also grows sort of a sense of an experience of solidarity and shared commitment to the struggle. I always say to people, if there's one thing you want to do to build the power of your local so that you are prepared to strike, do open bargaining. Like if that's all you did, that would be a lot. And so think about that. And just that reminds me of something I wanted to say as well in terms of how to win it, that if you hang out in some of the places I have to hang out, there's always somebody who's like, we need to go on strike right now. And then somebody else that says, but we can't strike, people aren't ready to strike. And then act as if like those are the two possibilities. But the thing that you want to be thinking about is, how do we build the power to strike? We want to get there. How do we get there? we know we're not there yet. We know we're going to need a lot of power. And open bargaining is, I think, a critical first step in building the power to strike. And of course, you think about going on strike, and you think about how scary that is for people. And we're going to talk a little bit later about overcoming fear. But it's really important as you, like, if we look at what they did in Brookline, Haverhill, Woburn, and Malden, they went out and talked. And I don't mean like did an email. I don't mean like put a flyer in. I mean, they went out and had conversations with every member. I was talking to folks down in Rutgers where they were just on strike, and the part-time lecture chapter of Rutgers, 7,000 members. They said they had 7,000 conversations, and more than that, because they had to talk to some people more than once. There's no getting around that as you were thinking about how you're going to build power to strike, to win the right to strike by striking, that you have to have conversations with people. And it's in those conversations that you build the relationships that will help people when they're scared and uncertain, when management is trying to divide you against each other, when they're feeling like we're never going to win. Absolutely essential. And it is the thing that is key to the work that we need to do to build the power to strike. And it is the thing we want to skip all the time. Can't we just do an email? Can't we just do a Facebook page? I've got a really good new text system. I promise people will respond. What happens when we strike and when we build the power to strike, when we enter a union and begin to organize, is that the very act of organizing is a way that we begin to, is an act of resistance to the ways that we're being constructed all the time at work, where we are constructed that we know ourselves as alone, as afraid, as uncertain. And when you, as organizers, say, no, actually, there's something we can do about this, and we're going to do something about it, you've already started to transform people in that action. So this can't be skipped. We can't organize for power in the same way that the boss organizes us, by telling us what to do, by telling us how to do it. We have to bring people in, and we bring that in through deeply democratic processes. So these are all bargaining team pictures. We have Haverhill ESPs. We've got Haverhill teachers, and I believe that's Woburn up at the top. And I just chose these pictures because I just talked about one-to-ones, but if we're going to build power to strike, to win the right to strike, we actually have to regularly be coming together and talking to each other and knowing each other as acting together. And open bargaining is a critical part of union democracy, but any place where we are bringing workers into conversation with each other to decide what they want to do, how they want to do it, that's how we're building power and confidence and the relationships that we're going to need to do this. I'm just reading what Risa has to say. Yeah, that if we even start to mention the bill, just to go back to that, that we really important point, Risa, like we open up a space in people's imagination that the way things are is not the way they have to be. That so often when I'm in conversation with people about organizing to strike, that what they say is, but it's illegal, and that just shuts the conversation down. So I think your point, Risa, is well taken, that the legislation is an entry point to actually, it could be different. And now let's have a conversation about how we're going to make it different. The other thing that's really important, and I don't know how much y'all were able to follow this on Facebook, but when Malden and Haverhill went on strike, Brookline went on strike in May, and then Malden and Haverhill in October, and they shared their strike authorization date and coordinated that. Although I think I'm not allowed to say that. If you see, these are memes that were produced of other locals, K-12 locals, supporting, and I think UMass unions start to get up here as well, supporting their strike. And if you look down at the bottom of this one in the middle, you can read it most clearly. Our unions are ready to offer whatever support may be needed for their strike effort, including picketing and inducing support from other public employees. Annetta, does that language look familiar to you? That is, they took the language from the legislation that says we are not allowed to strike, from the law, where you are not allowed to induce or support, encourage, induce, or support. Those are the three words. And they said, we're going to stand here and tell you that we unions are ready to encourage, induce, and support strikes. This started with Malden, and I think it was like Brookline was the first to publish a letter saying we will encourage, induce, and support. And then over time, more and more unions joined in to say, we too will encourage, induce, and support. So they were building the power to strike, building the solidarity, and also teaching, to Reese's point about the legislation, also teaching the members of these unions that were signing on that this was something that was possible. This wasn't something that we just said, no, we can't do that. It's the law. And that sense of possibility, I think, is something that I really would like to bring to you all today. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit, because I think the thing that most challenges people around striking is fear. Fear about losing their job. Somebody posted above earlier that, the air control people, Reagan did fire all of them. So we're very afraid of losing our jobs, afraid of being targeted afterwards. People are anxious about the fines that come with strikes. But the woman there is Paula Higgins, is a ESP in Malden. She won the MTA ESP of the year. And I was down at the ESP conference 2 weeks ago or so. And she said something that just actually got me crying. She was talking about her career, 26 years as a paraeducator, a union member who mostly engaged in the union around sort of mutual aid kinds of things, helping to provide for the community. And she said her proudest moment as a union member was when they overwhelmingly authorized the strike. And I think it's really important that for those of you who are union leaders, as well as union members, that what an opportunity was offered to Paula by her union organizing, and Paula and all the educators in Malden, to know what they were capable of, to know themselves as powerful, to know themselves as a collective, that we often, because of our own anxiety about rules and laws, don't actually give our members an opportunity to know about themselves. And I think we as organizers have to actually really seriously take that up. What are we not what are we not making a space to have happen? And then I just love the picture on Deb McCarthy's face in that rally, because what happens when we organize and strike and actually feel our power is that I was talking to an educator from Woburn after their strike, and she said, "You know, Barbara, I was doing the dishes the other day, and I was thinking, like, my life is not like anything it was before. I was remembering all that we were able to do. And like she said, like, it just changed me. Like, I keep thinking about what we did. And that's because what striking does is give us a sense to actually know our real power as workers, and to, through that real power, make meaningful changes for ourselves and the world that we're in. And that only happens by taking these steps. It's not a magical thing. It's a thing that happens because we lead people through activities. They lead themselves through activities that are transformative. Think about overcoming fear. In Brookline, Jessica Wender Schubau, the president there, talks about how they were in like a protracted negotiations. It was like 3 years. It was nuts. And they kept saying to people, like, go to a school committee meeting. We're going to have a standout. Wear a sticker. And then over time, fewer and fewer people were showing up to their actions. And Jessica said, like, I thought they didn't care. But what they discovered was that people were like, are we going to actually do something that matters or not? And when they set a strike date, everybody started showing up again. So we have to be direct and honest with members and members with each other about how much power is it going to take to win? And are we prepared to build the power that we need to win? In Brookline, they came to understand. In Malden, they came to understand. In Haverhill, they came to understand. In Woburn, that they were going to need the full force of their power to withhold their labor in order to win their demands. And then they said, how do we build towards that? So it's so much about thinking about how we understand power. And that's part of why I go back to the legislative issue, is that hearing Risa and Annetta's points about how we can use the legislation, but the dilemma with the legislation is it can lead us to look outward for power, when what striking is about is looking across for power and knowing our collective power. And that's how we will win it, is by accessing that power. And the last thing I just want to reiterate is, I love this picture. Like we not only have the support of the public, but the public needs us. Think about how they're privatizing UMass Amherst. We have a responsibility to the public to use the power that we have to defend public higher education. That's something that we sit with, and the public will support us when we do that. And as others have indicated, we want to bring people in. Open bargaining that brings in students and parents into the university. That would be some good open bargaining. Let those people tell us what they can't do when the people who that's going to affect are right in front of them. So We need it. We need the right to strike because it is the actual power that we have. And we win it by building the power to strike. And we have to start that now. We have to name that as something that we want to do and something that we are prepared to do. It's not an abstraction. We'll come to know it by doing it. So I'll take questions and comments. No questions, no comments. You all ready to go? All right, let's have an organizing meeting. Let's get some shit done here.
I had listened to a podcast this morning. I forget who was speaking, but they were talking about like strike readiness and reaching like a 90% level of like everyone being committed. And I guess I'm just curious, in these examples of like strike ready unions in education, what are like, are there things outside of or in addition to the open bargaining that really helped bring members on board, or were there challenges faced in open bargaining and getting people initially to participate, and hacks for that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of important questions, two important questions and sort of different. One is, I can't underline enough how much these strikes involve having members talk to members and everybody be talked to. Why would, what are you ready to do? Not even like, what are you ready to do? Because what are you ready to do can kind of position people as where they are rather than we want to have them where they're actually going to go, right? So question you like to ask people is like, if 75% of us said that we were ready to strike, would you be one of those 75%? Would you come? So you create a space in the question for the imagination of what's possible. But you also have to like talk through like, what are people afraid of? How are we gonna, what can we do about that fear? All of these places in there, like both in one-to-one conversations, and then also in union meetings leading up to the strike, we're very open about talking about people's fears and uncertainties and like make a place for that. And what you'll discover is that people begin to experience themselves as like, oh, but we're together in this. We can do this. They support each other in that. But you can't skip like conversation after conversation after conversation, going back to people, identifying who you need to talk to because they're afraid. And then bringing people into conversation with each other. I remember Jess Winder-Schubau in Brookline called me like the morning that they were going to vote on their strike authorization. And she was terrified that they were going to vote against it because there were a few people who were complaining. And I was like, Jess, like, you've done your work. You've talked to everybody. People have talked to each other. Let the members decide and let the members hear what others are afraid of. Like, and that feels counterintuitive, right? Like, this is scary shit, man. Let's not talk about the things that we're worried about. Let's pretend it's going to be fine. But to the degree that the spaces are really created for people to talk about it, there's the members brought each other to the place where they're ready. Interesting question about how to get people to open bargaining. I've always been sort of surprised at how that can be a problem. And I think sometimes in particular in higher ed, and I'm not sure why that is. But I think what you want to be doing is sort of open bargaining isn't just about having people in the meeting. It's about what you do before you even get into bargaining. It's about the conversations that you have before you enter your contract campaign, so that members from the beginning are like engaged in these are our demands. This is how we're going to fight. This is how we're going to escalate. Each piece of that has to be democratic, not oh, by the way, we're having open bargaining. Come on if you want to join us, right? Like, it needs to be built in from the beginning. But then once people are attending, make sure you have mechanisms for people to be communicating out with each other about what they see and inviting each other back in. So you have to sort of have those systems out so that whoever observes the bargaining as part of the bargaining you've designed it so they'll be out talking to people, because that's when people will get curious to come in. Martin and Pam and Martha. So I'll say two parts to that. One is, I think you all are really lucky as public sector workers that what you do is serve the public. And when you are fighting for public education, and that includes your wages and your benefits, you are fighting for the public and for this institution. And I think we need to have confidence about that it's like, yeah, no, it matters that I get paid well, because when I get paid well, that means that this is a stronger institution for the students that we serve. And I think it really matters that we have confidence about that. We can extend that to include demands that are specifically sort of common good demands that say, like, what's going to be offered to our students? What are the students' experience going to be like in the university, and why it matters, and have specific demands relative to that. So I think that's really important that we do that, both that we think about common good demands that we're going to serve the entire community. But I also think it really matters, and we don't do enough of this in unions, to be like, no, my wages actually make this a better institution. And retention is good for this institution, and like own that and say it. But the other thing I want to say, and this is like a hot button for me, so pardon me if I get a little stirred up. Like, I don't buy that the public isn't with us. Like, that's a propaganda piece that I have never seen to actually be true. It goes back to our question 2 fight in 2016 when we stopped the charter expansion. We were told we should not take on that fight because people wouldn't believe teachers, and they hated public schools, by the way. And in particular, this was a civil rights issue. And we found out that that was absolutely not true. The Walton Foundation published their report about why they lost and we won. And you know what they said the problem was? People believe teachers. That's what they said. That's the sentence. People value the public good. They value public higher education. It's one of the things that MTA polling, I don't believe in polling, but I pull it out where I can. MTA polling shows that, like, public higher education is actually the top of the interests of people in Massachusetts on a regular basis. So we need to, like, know that we are defending something valuable, and we are valuable in it. And the community is with us on that. In Haverhill and Woburn, it's nuts how much the community is with them. Those communities have been completely transformed by these strikes because they've come to understand that the people that they had elected are not interested in the community, because they started off understanding that the teachers are, the educators are. So, like, we have to help each other, I think, really overcome that myth, that piece of propaganda that we've internalized as well, because it's just not true. Like, it's just, I've not seen where it's true. Pamela.
Thanks, Barbara. So when you say that you need to have open sessions, you mean actual negotiation times. And that doesn't necessarily have to be over a contract, correct? It could be over an issue?
It could, yeah, absolutely.
As right now we seem to be on hold for contract bargaining.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be interesting. Like, it's one of the first things like that happens when I talk to people who are newly elected into leadership. They're like, I've been asked by the president or the superintendent to meet with them regularly. Just me and the superintendent. And I'm like, don't ever meet with those people alone.
No.
Don't. This is about a deep democracy. Members should be a part of every conversation. And they'll get angry. They'll walk out. They'll say, we can't do this because they know how dangerous it is.
Yeah, they
When,
didn't like it at UMass Amherst in the past.
yeah, they won't like it. But like,
No.
remember, whenever they're objecting, it always blows me away how much management understands our power much better than we do.
Hmm.
We don't know how we don't let ourselves know how powerful we are. But a good cue, a good like pay attention, is when management gets upset when we ask for something that seems pretty basic. They're upset because they understand that it contains within it a potential for a shift in the balance of power. And that's what happens with open bargaining, with open negotiations of any kind. It shifts the balance of power. And they don't want that. They want leadership alone in a room with them.
Right. Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it.
Hi, Martha. Yeah, I misspoke if I said workers. It's public support for higher education, I know. I would be very comfortable jumping in behind that to say higher ed workers. And I think workers is a key piece of that as well. I think what people, what the public sometimes doesn't know, for those of you in PSU here, like is how many public higher ed workers there are, what it takes to have an institution, a public higher education institution, and how can we help people see you. But that's the more transparent we are about our bargaining and our struggles, the more we talk about things, the more we share things, the more the public begins to understand. If you look what's happening with education support professionals across the state right now, for a long, long time, the people who knew what paraprofessionals did were the parents whose child was being supported by that paraprofessional. But what's happened now is that there are all kinds of people who are like, you mean they're changing diapers every day and they're not even making a living wage? You mean they're then moving in and teaching a class and they're not even making a, like, we have to be transparent in lots of ways in terms of helping people understand who we are and the work we do. And
Can I just pause for a moment for, I know some people have had to leave already. It is 1 o'clock. I can stay on a little bit longer. I don't know, Barbara, are you able to stay a little bit longer for those who have a
yeah,
few
I've
more
got about
questions?
5 more minutes and I gotta hop to a
Okay.
meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just want to thank everybody for coming. For anybody who has to leave, I want to thank Barbara in particular for this very informative presentation. And I do want to make mention that on May 10th, we plan another session of Lunch and Learn, and this is going to be a different topic altogether on PSU benefits. Leslie Frazier from the Workforce Initiative, I forget the exact title of their title, and Christy, I don't know if I'm going to get her name right, last name. It's is on our chair for the membership in Amherst are going to help present that. So anyways, please hold the date, May 10th at noon. And I know you got just a few more minutes, Barbara, with a few more questions. Thank you so much.
certainly things are designed to keep us overwhelmed and overworked. That's, I think, one of the things I've learned as an organizer, and I've really had to learn this, I didn't know it before, is how much we operate in structures that are designed to keep us too tired, that are designed to keep us feeling hopeless, that are designed to keep us fearful and confused and divided. And I think part of what's really important is to name that for each other so that we are not blaming ourselves or blaming others. That this is not about anybody's character or anybody's inability to organize their lives more effectively, but it's like, yeah, this is the world we're given. And then how can we help each other strategize within that? But there's no getting around that 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 some number of people are going to be really tired doing this and take it up, and we have to give each other breaks along the way. The thing I would say though is I don't want to be like naive about this, so but I do think that people get more tired when they feel like they're not sure it's going to make a difference. And that's the lesson I took away from Brookline, was that people were being asked to do the same thing and they felt it not making a difference. It wasn't making a difference. But when they were invited to do something that felt like, oh, this could actually make a difference, this is actually power, they jumped on board. You got it, sister. And that's a shift that comes from activity. Like what you just said, Gail, is so important, because I'm also a big believer that we don't, it's going to sound ridiculous, that we don't ask enough from members, in the sense that we don't invite people enough to come into spaces where they can feel what you felt when you spoke up. And that changes us. Tired and worn out, and, but something has shifted in you that you're like, I'm not giving this up. And we have to give people that opportunity. We don't give that opportunity enough, I don't think.
I think that's the direction delegate council is going in, and I would say to you, like, I'm going to start looking to delegates to tap people in their areas that look like natural leaders to start having those conversations too, because like the chapter board isn't going to fix this on their own, the delegates aren't going to fix this on their own. Like individual members can't do it, but like the more that we're all ready to have those conversations when the educational moment strikes, which happens all the time because people love to complain about work, and how do we change those complaints? We organize. Like the more that we're ready to have those conversations, but definitely we can build that in.
So I think on this note, we should wrap up. And again, thank you very much, Barbara. This has been, I think it has turned on the light bulb for a lot of people here who've been in attendance, and it further strengthens what Annetta was teaching us last month. So thank you very much again, everyone, and thanks for coming. We will share the presentation with all memberships at Amherst and Boston.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Steve, I love your openness about that. I just want to say that's awesome. My hint to you, just ask questions. Only ask questions. You're not allowed to say anything. Hi, my name's Steve. That's the last thing you say. Find out what they care about. Good to see you all.
Okay,
you very
thank you.
much.
Bye, everyone.
Solidarity. Bye-bye. Bye.